A homeless girl was sitting on the icy sidewalk when a millionaire brutally assaulted her. But as she fell, hurt, to the ground, she said something that chilled his blood. "My dad will be back." What happened next revealed a devastating truth that would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. A grey dawn broke over the city, painting the glass towers that stood like monuments to power with melancholy. On the 30th floor of one of these giants, the millionaire watched the street activity through the panoramic window of his office. His fingers drummed impatiently on the mahogany desk as he awaited the morning sales report. At 42, he had built a real estate empire that made his competitors envious. Luxury buildings scattered throughout the city bore his architectural signature and his insatiable thirst for profit. His employees feared him as much as they respected him. The coldness in his brown eyes had become legendary in business circles, as had his intolerance for anything he considered imperfection. Dressed in an Italian suit that cost more than the annual salary of his doorman, he went down to the ground floor to personally inspect the construction of his newest development. The high-end residential project promised to be the most exclusive in the area, intended only for those who could pay astronomical figures for an apartment. Across town, far from the world of marble and crystal, a 9-year-old girl woke up on damp cardboard in a dark alley. Her disheveled brown hair framed a face that still held traces of innocence despite everything she had been through. Her eyes, a deep brown that seemed to carry centuries of sadness, slowly opened to another day of survival. It had been 3 months since she lost her mother. 3 months since she found herself completely alone in this hostile world. Tuberculosis had taken her only family, leaving her with nothing but a worn backpack containing a few threadbare clothes and an old photo that she kept as a treasure. Hunger gnawed at her thin stomach as she walked the streets looking for any opportunity. Her steps instinctively led her to the wealthier neighborhoods, where people tended to be more generous. Or so she hoped. The contrast was stark. While the millionaire savored his special Colombian coffee in an imported porcelain cup, the girl rummaged through trash cans for scraps of food. As he adjusted his silk tie in front of the mirror, she tried to comb her hair with her fingers, to avoid looking so scruffy. The two worlds seemed destined never to meet. He, protected by his fortune and arrogance. She, invisible to the eyes of a society that preferred to ignore her existence. But fate has peculiar ways of intertwining lives that seemingly have nothing in common. The girl arrived at the main avenue of the upscale neighborhood shortly before noon. The sun had finally conquered the clouds, but the cold wind still cut through her skin, through the clothes inadequate for the approaching winter. She chose a strategic spot, in front of one of the most imposing buildings in the area, spreading out a small, tattered blanket she had found days ago on the ground. She didn't beg with words. She just sat there, with the dignity she had left, allowing her presence to touch the consciences of passers-by. Some hurried executives looked away, others pretended not to see her. Few stopped to drop a few coins in front of her, a gesture she always received with a shy nod of gratitude. The millionaire, at that same moment, was reviewing contracts on the 20th floor of the building in front of which the girl had positioned herself. His company was about to close a multi-million-dollar deal that would further expand his empire. The satisfaction of another financial victory warmed his chest when the phone rang. "Sir, there's a situation downstairs that requires your attention," said the doorman's voice, filled with embarrassment. "What kind of situation?" he asked, already irritated by the interruption. A street child has settled right in front of the building. The residents are complaining. They say it depreciates the image of the condo." The millionaire's blood boiled instantly. Everything he had worked for, all the sophistication he had built, being threatened by a beggar. His company had invested. Millions in that location precisely because of its exclusivity. He would not allow anything to tarnish the reputation of the development. "I'm coming down," he growled, slamming the phone down. The gilded elevator descended slowly, but with each floor that passed, the millionaire's anger grew exponentially. His fists clenched and unclenched in a nervous rhythm as he imagined the embarrassing scene that awaited him. Potential clients might back out of the deal upon seeing a beggar at the door. Investors would question the security of the area. Everything he had fought for was being put at risk by a single person. When the doors opened on the ground floor, his footsteps echoed on the polished marble of the hall. The doorman awaited him with an expression of discomfort, discreetly pointing to the main entrance through the glass doors. Some residents watched the scene from afar, whispering to each other with disapproval. "How long has this person been there?" he asked, his voice as sharp as a blade. "About 2 hours, sir. We tried to talk to her, but she doesn't move. She doesn't cause any trouble. She just is there." The millionaire pushed the glass doors open with unnecessary force, emerging onto the sidewalk like a storm about to break. What he saw, however, caught him off guard for a split second. It wasn't the dirty, aggressive beggar he had imagined, but a child, a small, frail girl, sitting on a tattered blanket with a posture that exuded an improbable dignity. But the surprise lasted only a moment. The fury returned with redoubled force. An abandoned child, there was even worse. It made the situation more complicated, more delicate, more likely to generate embarrassment and bad publicity. "What are you doing here?" he yelled, approaching with long strides. The girl raised her eyes slowly. There was no fear in that deep brown gaze, only a disturbing serenity. She didn't answer immediately, as if she was assessing who this well-dressed man was, who was approaching her with such hostility. "I'm waiting," she said finally, her voice firm despite her age. "Waiting for what? And why exactly here in front of my building?" His voice rose even higher, drawing curious glances from pedestrians. "Waiting for someone," she replied with the same calmness, unfazed by his aggressive tone. The simplicity of the answer enraged him even more. Was this child mocking him, testing his patience? A few onlookers began to gather, taking out their cell phones to film the scene. The situation was becoming exactly the kind of public spectacle he dreaded. "Most. You can't stay here. This is a luxury condo, not a homeless shelter," he yelled, completely losing control. The crowd grew. Murmurs of disapproval began to arise, but not directed at the girl. They were for him. An elderly lady commented something about a heartless man. A young executive shook his head in disgust. The public humiliation he was trying to avoid was happening, but he was the villain of the story. Blinded by anger and the desperation to end that embarrassing situation, the millionaire did something he never imagined himself capable of. He grabbed the girl's thin arm with excessive force and pulled her abruptly to her feet. "You're leaving here right now," he snarled, shaking her. The girl's backpack fell to the ground, scattering her few belongings across the sidewalk. Some old clothes, a half-destroyed notebook, a plastic mug, and a photo that blew away in the wind. Without thinking about the consequences, he pushed her violently. The girl lost her balance and fell to her knees on the rough concrete. Her hands scraped as she tried to break her fall, and a trickle of blood appeared on her right elbow. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't cry. She just turned slowly to face him, with those eyes that seemed to carry a wisdom impossible for her age. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the traffic seemed to have stopped. Everyone present watched, shocked by the unnecessary brutality. Some were already dialing 911. Others continued filming, capturing every second of that gratuitous violence. It was then that she spoke. With a firm voice filled with a strange certainty that contrasted with her vulnerable condition, the girl uttered the words that would echo in the millionaire's mind for days to come. "My dad will be back." The phrase hung in the air like a prophecy. It wasn't a threat, nor a plea for help. It was a declaration of absolute faith, spoken with the conviction of someone who knows truths that others cannot see. The millionaire was paralyzed. There was something in those words, in that tone, in that look that deeply disconcerted him. He expected tears, pleas, fear, but he found only an unwavering certainty that he couldn't comprehend. The onlookers continued to watch and film. Sirens sounded in the distance. The situation had completely spiraled out of his control, but he remained there, hypnotized by the girl's eyes, trying to decipher the mystery behind that simple phrase he had just heard. The hours that followed were a nightmare for the millionaire. The police arrived quickly, alerted by the videos that were already circulating on social media. The images of the assault spread like wildfire, instantly transforming him into the symbol of capitalist cruelty against the most vulnerable. While giving his statement at the police station, his mind couldn't disconnect from that phrase, "My dad will be back." The words echoed in his head with a disturbing insistence. There was something familiar in those brown eyes, something that stirred memories buried long ago. His lawyer, a man experienced in image crises, worked frantically to minimize the damage. "We'll claim excessive stress, business pressure. You'll make a public apology, donate a generous amount to charities, and this will pass," he said, confident in his usual strategy. But the millionaire barely listened to him. His mind was fixated on that child. Who was her father? A dangerous criminal? Someone influential who could take revenge? The girl's certainty had been too strange, as if she knew something he didn't. The girl, meanwhile, had been taken to a temporary shelter while social workers investigated her situation. During the ride in the ambulance that treated her injuries, she remained silent, tightly clutching the crumpled photo she had managed to pick up before being taken away. At the shelter, a kind employee tried to get her to talk about her family, about her living conditions, about anything that could help understand her situation. But the girl just repeated the same thing. "My dad will be back. He told me he would." The social worker recorded the information with skepticism. She had seen hundreds of abandoned children clinging to false hopes about parents who would never return. It was a form of psychological defense, a denial of the brutal reality of abandonment. Meanwhile, the millionaire arrived at his mansion in the late afternoon, exhausted and disturbed. The three-story house, decorated by renowned designers, seemed colder and emptier than ever. He poured himself an expensive whiskey and settled into his leather armchair, trying to process the day's events. Social media was in a frenzy. Millionaire bully, trending worldwide. His company was already receiving calls from clients canceling deals. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting for the next day. Everything he had built was collapsing because of 5 minutes of lost control. But it wasn't the financial crisis that disturbed him most. It was that phrase, "My dad will be back." Why did those words bother him so much? Why couldn't he stop thinking about the girl's eyes? He tried to distract himself by reviewing contracts, answering emails, planning image recovery strategies. Nothing worked. With each attempt to concentrate, his mind returned to the girl, to her inexplicable dignity, to the way she had looked at him without fear, even after the assault. Night came without him finding peace. Lying in his king-size bed, staring at the ceiling decorated with golden frames, the millionaire found himself confronting memories he preferred to keep buried. Memories of a time when he was different, younger, perhaps even more human. There was a woman many years ago, a young woman with deep brown eyes, similar to... No, it was impossible. Her name was Eleanor, and she had been his first true love. Perhaps the only one. They were too young, he was still building his empire. She dreamed of being a teacher. The relationship ended abruptly when he decided that love was an obstacle to his ambitious plans. Elena had tried to talk to him a few times after the breakup, but he had refused to answer her. He was focused on business, on conquering the world. He had no time for sentimentalities of the past. Eventually, she stopped trying to contact him, and he never heard from her again. "It can't be," he muttered to himself, sitting up abruptly, in bed. But the resemblance was undeniable. The eyes, the shape of the face, even the way the girl maintained her dignity in adverse situations reminded him of Elena. He spent the entire night awake, battling thoughts he didn't want to face. He tried to convince himself that it was just coincidence, that the stress of the day was making his imagination create non-existent connections. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost something important, something he might never be able to recover. When the sun rose, a decision had been made. He needed to find out who that girl was. Not out of curiosity, not out of remorse, but out of a visceral need to understand why she affected him so much. Why that simple phrase had destroyed all his emotional defenses. He called his private investigator, a discreet man who had already solved other delicate problems for him. "I need all the information on that child from yesterday. Name, origin, family, everything, and I want it today." He didn't yet know that this investigation would reveal the most devastating truth of his life, a truth that would forever change his perception of himself, the past, and the future he could still build. The private investigator worked with the efficiency that justified his astronomical fees. In a few hours, he had gathered information that painted a devastating picture of the girl's life. Her name was Sophia. She was 9 years old, and she had been living on the streets for 3 months since her mother died of tuberculosis. The mother's name was Elena Rodriguez. When the millionaire read that name in the report, he felt as if the ground had opened up beneath his feet. His hands trembled as he leafed through the pages that detailed the life of misery that Elena had faced in recent years. Precarious jobs, illnesses, the desperate struggle to raise a daughter alone in subhuman conditions. Elena had died in a public hospital, abandoned by the system, without resources for adequate treatment. Sophia was left completely alone, with no known relatives, no documents proving paternity. Officially, she was an orphan with no father. But there was something else in the report. Among Sophia's few belongings, the investigator had photographed an image that made the millionaire's heart stop. An old, faded photo where he appeared next to Elena, both young, smiling, embraced in a picnic that he still vaguely remembered. That photo had been taken shortly before they ended the relationship. He remembered the day. Elena was acting strange. She wanted to talk about something important, but he was obsessed with a business opportunity. He said they would talk later, but later never came. A week later, he broke up with her over the phone, claiming they needed to follow different paths. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Elena had tried to talk to him because she was pregnant. The insistent calls after the breakup weren't attempts at reconciliation. They were a desperate mother trying to tell the father about the child she was expecting. And he, in his arrogance and ambition, had ignored all the attempts. Sophia was his daughter. The girl he had brutally assaulted in front of dozens of people was his own daughter. The child who lived on the streets, hungry and cold, was part of him. The dad who will be back, of whom she spoke with such certainty, it was him. But how did she know? How could an abandoned child have so much conviction about the return of a father she had never known? The investigator had discovered more details. Elena, in the last months of her life, often delirious due to the high fever of tuberculosis. But in her lucid moments, she told Sophia about a man she considered the great love of her life. She told stories about him, showed the photo, said that one day he would find out about her and come to get her. Your father is an important man, Sophia. He will find out that you exist, and he will come to get you. Have faith, were some of Elena's last words before she died. Sophia had grown up with this hope planted in her heart. It wasn't childish delusion. It was unwavering faith transmitted by a mother who knew the man behind the cold businessman. Elena had seen in him qualities that he himself had forgotten he possessed. The millionaire spent the rest of the day locked in his office, trying to process the emotional devastation that the discovery had caused. His daughter. He had a daughter, and she had lived 9 years in miserable conditions while he accumulated unnecessary wealth. Elena had died alone, without resources, while he dined in expensive restaurants without caring about anything other than his profits. He tried to work, but the words in the contracts blurred before his eyes. He tried to think of business strategies, but his mind could only imagine little Sophia, going hungry, sleeping in the open, taking care of her sick mother with her tiny hands. And he had pushed her. He had hurt his own daughter, the daughter that Elena had trusted he would one day come to get. The irony was too cruel to bear. Around late afternoon, he made a decision. He needed to see her again. He didn't know how. He didn't know what he would say, but he needed to at least try to remedy the horror he had done. Maybe he didn't deserve forgiveness, but Sophia deserved an explanation. She deserved to know that the father her mother had promised actually existed. He drove to the shelter where Sophia was being temporarily cared for. The receptionist recognized him immediately. The videos of the assault were still circulating. On the internet, his presence there caused an immediate uproar. "Sir, I believe it would be best if you weren't here," said the shelter coordinator, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "The child has been through enough trauma already. I need to talk to her just a few minutes, please." "That's completely impossible. You are exactly the last person who should be approaching that girl right now." He insisted, tried to explain that there were misunderstandings, that he needed to clarify some things, but his reputation preceded him. To everyone there, he was just the cruel millionaire who had assaulted a defenseless child. There was no way to explain the truth without sounding like a lame excuse. He left the shelter without being able to see her, but he didn't give up. For the first time in decades, there was something more important than money in his life. He had discovered that he was a father, and he needed to find a way to approach the daughter he had never known, but who awaited him with an unwavering faith that he didn't know if he deserved. In the days that followed, the millionaire found himself in a completely new and disconcerting situation. For the first time in his adult life, money and influence weren't enough to solve a problem. Every attempt to approach Sophia was blocked by the Child Protective Services, who rightfully saw him as a threat. He hired the best family lawyers in the country, but they were clear. Proving paternity would only be the first step in a long and complex process. His public assault on the girl had created a legal precedent that would greatly hinder any attempt at custody or even visitation rights. Frustrated with the legal barriers, he began to adopt a different approach. He began to frequent the surroundings of the shelter, not to intrude or pressure, but simply to be near. He sat on a bench in the park across the street, watching from afar the children playing in the yard during recreation periods. It was there that he saw Sophia, always a little apart from the other children, holding her faded photo and looking at the gate as if she were waiting for someone. Even from a distance, he could perceive that she maintained the same disturbing serenity that had impressed him at their first encounter. A shelter employee, a young social worker named Marina, began to notice the constant presence of the elegant man in the park. Initially suspicious, she began to observe him more closely. There was something different in his behavior. He didn't seem threatening or obsessive. He seemed lost. After a week of mutual observation from a distance, Marina decided to approach the millionaire. "You're the man from the videos, aren't you?" she asked directly, sitting on the bench next to him. He nodded, expecting hostility, but finding only genuine curiosity. "Why do you stay here every day?" The question was simple, but the answer was too complex for words. How to explain that he had discovered he was a father? How to tell that his daughter lived in a fantasy about a father who would return, without knowing that this father was there, a few feet away, prevented from approaching by his own actions? "I made a terrible mistake," he said finally. "And now, I don't know how to fix it." Marina studied his expression for a long moment. There was sincerity there, a vulnerability that didn't match the image of the cruel businessman portrayed in the media. "Sophia talks about her father every day," she commented casually. "She's impressively certain that he'll show up." The millionaire felt his heart race. What exactly does she say? That he's a good man, but that sometimes good people get lost. That her mother said that when he found out about her, he would completely change his life. It's a touching faith, but you think it's fantasy. It's common in abandoned children. They create narratives to cope with abandonment. "What if it wasn't fantasy?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Marina looked at him strangely. "What do you mean?" It was then that he made the riskiest decision of his life. He told her everything, about Eleanor, about the relationship that had ended abruptly, about the discovery of paternity, about the remorse that had consumed him ever since. He showed the documents that proved his version, including the photo that Sophia carried. The young social worker was shocked. The story was too absurd to be invented, but also too difficult to be believed. A millionaire discovering that he had assaulted his own daughter seemed like a melodramatic movie script. "Even if it's true," she said finally, "that doesn't change what you did. Sophia may be your daughter biologically, but you're a stranger to her, and a stranger who hurt her." "I know," he admitted, "but I need to try. She's waiting for her father to come back. Maybe it's a chance for both of us to start over." Marina was silent for several minutes, processing the information. Finally, she sighed deeply. "I can't promote an official meeting. It would be against all the rules, but Sophia has free time in the garden every afternoon at 4 o'clock. She always sits on the bench near the fence, looking at the street." It wasn't an authorization, but it was an opportunity. The next day, at 4 o'clock sharp, the millionaire positioned himself on the other side of the low fence that separated the shelter's garden from the sidewalk. Sophia was there as expected, holding her photo and looking at the horizon. When their eyes met, she showed no surprise or fear. She just studied him for a long moment, as if she were confirming something she already knew. "You came back," she said simply. His words were stuck in his throat. How to explain everything he had discovered. How to ask for forgiveness for a lifetime of absence. "Sophia," he managed to say finally, I have some things to tell you." She approached the fence, still holding the photo. "Mom said you would be different when you found me. She said it would be like waking up from a bad dream." The accuracy of the description left him speechless. Elena had known better than he himself the man he would become. She had predicted his transformation, even without being able to see it. In the days that followed, those informal meetings became the most important moment of both their days. Sophia began to tell him about her life, about Elena, about the difficult months on the streets. He, in turn, began to talk about regrets, about the man he used to be and the man he wanted to become. But not everything was easy. The media discovered their meetings and created a new scandal. State lawyers began to investigate whether he was violating restraining orders. Human rights groups protested in front of the shelter, demanding that he be kept away from Sophia. The situation was becoming unsustainable. But for the first time in a long time, the millionaire wasn't just worried. about himself. He was worried about Sophia, about the impact that all that exposure was having on her. He was learning what it meant to put someone else before his own interests. The pressure was becoming unbearable. The protests in front of the shelter intensified daily, turning the lives of Sophia and the other children into a media circus. Groups of activists shouted for the rights of children, while others defended the right of a father to meet his daughter. Sophia, at the center of all this storm, maintained her characteristic serenity, but it was visible that the situation was beginning to affect her. It was on a particularly tumultuous afternoon that Marina made a risky decision. The protests had become violent, with clashes between opposing groups. The police had been called 3 times that week, and the environment was becoming dangerous. For the children, "I need to talk to you," she said to the millionaire, who was watching everything from a distance with an anguished expression. "But not here. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks down. Meet me there in an hour." At the coffee shop, away from prying eyes and cameras, Marina placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents that Sophia had shown her in recent days. Letters that Elena had written but never sent, medical records, and more photos. "Sophia gave me this yesterday," Marina said, opening the folder. "She said her mother kept everything in a shoebox, and that before she died, she asked her to give everything to her father when he appeared." The millionaire picked up the first letter with trembling hands. Elena's handwriting, which he recognized, immediately was preserved on the paper yellowed by time. "My dearest Eduardo, if you are reading this, it means that our daughter has finally found you. I know we ended badly. I know you had your dreams and ambitions, and I didn't want to get in the way, but I needed you to know that you have a daughter. She has your eyes, your determined way, but she has my heart. I named her Sophia, which means wisdom, because since she was little, she has shown an understanding of the world that impresses me." His hands were shaking so much that he could barely continue reading. Marina watched in silence, seeing the devastating impact that Elena's words had on him. The letter continued for several pages, detailing Sophia's early years, the financial difficulties, the progression of Elena's illness, but also moments of joy of a dedicated mother raising a special daughter alone. "I never spoke badly of you." To her, "I always said that you were a good man who was just lost along the paths of life." She grew up believing that one day you would find out about her and come to get her. "I keep that hope alive because I know your heart, Eduardo. I know there is goodness in you, even if it is buried under years of ambition and hardness." The last part of the letter completely destroyed him. "I'm dying, Eduardo. Tuberculosis is winning, and soon Sophia will be alone in the world. My only peace comes from the certainty that, even if it's late, you will find out about her. Sophia has an unwavering faith that this will happen. Sometimes I think she knows things that even I don't understand. Take care of her for both of us. She is our second chance to do things right." When he finished reading, tears were flowing freely down the millionaire's face. For the first time in decades, he cried without caring who might see him. Marina took a tissue and handed it to him. "There's more," she said softly, showing him other letters. "Elena wrote one for each birthday of Sophia that she wouldn't live to see until she was 18. They're all here, waiting." The revelation was overwhelming. Elena had planned everything, had prepared Sophia for that moment, had kept hope alive, even knowing that she wouldn't be present to witness the reunion. "How did Sophia know that I was the father?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "She said she recognized you the first time you met. Not by your face, because you've changed a lot since the photo, but by your eyes. Elena always said that his eyes were the same as hers. And when Sophia saw you, she knew immediately. That's why she wasn't afraid. That's why she said with such certainty that her father was coming back. She knew you were already there. The millionaire ran his hands over his face, trying to process everything. And now, how do I fix all this? How do I ask for forgiveness for a lifetime? Marina closed the folder and looked him in the eyes. Sophia doesn't want apologies. She wants to meet her father, but there's a problem. What? A human rights lawyer has taken the case. She is filing a lawsuit to have you permanently kept away from Sophia. She considers you a threat, and with the videos of the assault, she has solid arguments. His heart sank. After discovering the truth, after finally understanding what Eleanor had tried to tell him years ago, he could lose the chance to know his daughter forever. When will the hearing be? Next week, and there's more. The media found out about the letters. Someone leaked the information, and now the whole story is coming to light. You're going to have to make a decision. Fight publicly for paternity, exposing Sophia to even more exposure, or give up and leave her alone. The dilemma was cruel. Fighting for her meant dragging her into a painful public process. Giving up meant abandoning her again, just as he had done with Elena years ago. But as he pondered his options, a phrase from Elena echoed in his mind, our second chance to do things right. Maybe it was time to finally do the right thing, even if it meant putting Sophia's needs before his own. For the first time in his life, the lawyer responsible for Sophia's case was a formidable woman. Dr. Helena Cardoso had dedicated her career to protecting vulnerable children, and cases like Sophia's motivated her particularly. In her view, powerful men who assaulted children needed to be kept away from them, regardless of any claim of paternity. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning at the city's central courthouse. The media turned the event into a spectacle. Dozens of reporters, cameramen, and onlookers crowded on the steps of the building, turning a legal process into public entertainment. Sophia, accompanied by Marina and other shelter staff, arrived at the courthouse from the back, trying to avoid the crowd. Even so, some cameras managed to capture her, a small girl walking among serious adults, carrying her worn backpack and the faded photo she never abandoned. The millionaire arrived with his team of lawyers, all in impeccable suits and confident posture. But he himself looked different. The arrogant and cold man from the viral videos had given way to someone visibly shaken, who avoided the cameras and seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. The hearing began with Dr. Eleanor presenting her argument. She was eloquent, passionate, and had a point in many respects. She showed the videos of the assault, cited statistics on violence against children, argued that men with a history of violence should not have access to minors, regardless of biological ties. "Your Honor," she said to the judge, "we cannot allow this man's wealth and influence to place him above the law. Sophia is a traumatized child who deserves protection, not more exposure to someone who has already demonstrated that he is capable of violence against her." The millionaire's lawyers responded with technical arguments about parental rights, DNA tests, and extenuating circumstances. But their words sounded empty in the face of the emotional strength of Helena's argument. It was then that something unexpected happened. Sophia asked to speak. "I would like to say something," she said, rising from her chair. The judge hesitated. It was unusual to allow a child so young to speak in hearings like that. But there was something in Sophia's posture, in the clarity of her voice, that made him reconsider. "You may speak, but only briefly," he said. Sophia walked to the center of the room, where everyone could see her. Her voice was firm, without fear, filled with the same certainty that she had shown since her first meeting with the millionaire. "I know you think he's bad because he pushed me. I was sad when that happened too. But Mom taught me that sometimes people do bad things when they're scared or confused. He was confused because he didn't know I was his daughter." The room fell silent. Even Dr. Helena stopped taking notes to listen. Mom always said that my father was a good man who was lost. She knew that when he found me, he would remember who he really was. I saw that happen. After he pushed me and I said my dad was coming back, I saw in his eyes that he remembered. He changed. She turned to look directly at the millionaire. You remembered, didn't you? Who you were before you got lost. Tears streamed freely down his face. There was no way to hide the emotion, no way to maintain the mask of the cold businessman. Before his daughter, before everyone, he was just a broken man who had found his humanity too late. I remembered, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Sophia smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen her give since her mother's death. Then you don't have to be afraid of me. I've already forgiven you. Dr. Helena stood up immediately. Your Honor, the child is clearly in a state of emotional vulnerability. She cannot make decisions about her own safety. It is our duty to protect her, even if she doesn't understand that she needs protection. But the judge was visibly touched by Sophia's maturity and clarity. Still, the law was clear. The assault had happened, it was documented, and there were legal precedents to follow. I understand the minor's feelings, he said finally, but my responsibility is to ensure her safety above all else. Considering the history of violence, even if isolated, and the child's vulnerability, I determine that the restraining order shall be maintained. The petitioner may not approach the minor for a period of 6 months, when the case will be re-evaluated. The decision fell like a hammer on the millionaire's heart. 6 months away from Sophia, 6 months without being able to build the relationship that they had both waited so long to have. Sophia heard the decision without flinching. She approached him before the security guards could stop her. 6 months isn't forever, she said, reaching for his hand for a moment. Mom waited 9 years to tell me about you. I can wait 6 months to get to know you better. She placed something in his hand, one of Elena's letters, folded carefully. This is for you to read when you're feeling lost again. Mom wrote it the day I was born. Before he could respond, Sophia was led out of the room by the shelter staff. The millionaire stood there, holding the letter, feeling the weight of the forced separation and the responsibility that his own violence had created. Dr. Helena approached him while his lawyers discussed possibilities of appeal. I sincerely hope that you use these 6 months to reflect on your actions, she said. That girl has an impressive faith in you. Don't disappoint her again. When he arrived home that night, he opened Elena's letter with trembling hands. The verse lines destroyed him. Eduardo, our daughter was born today. She is perfect. And when she opened her eyes for the first time, I thought of you. I know we are not together. I know you chose a different path, but somewhere in my heart, I am sure that one day you will hold this girl in your arms and remember how good it is to love someone more than yourself. Now he finally understood. Sophia wasn't just waiting for a father. She was waiting for him to remember how to love. And as painful as it was, he would have to prove that he was capable of it before he deserved to be near her again. The 6 months of forced separation became the most transformative period of the millionaire's life. For the first time in decades, he was forced to confront who he really was, away from the distractions of business and the adoration of employees who feared to contradict him. Elena's letter, written on the day of Sophia's birth, became his daily reading. Each word was a reminder of who he had been before ambition consumed his humanity. Elena had seen in him qualities that he himself had forgotten: generosity, ability to love, dreams that went beyond money. You always wanted to have a big family, Elena wrote in one of the letters. You talked about teaching your children to be kind, to help others, to see beauty in the world. I know that man still exists inside you, just sleeping under years of competition and loneliness. Inspired by Elena's words and Sophia's unwavering faith, he began to make different choices. First, he sought psychological help. something he had always considered a sign of weakness. The therapist, a man experienced in trauma and family relationships, helped him understand the origins of his anger and emotional coldness. "You built walls to protect yourself from rejection," the psychologist explained during one of the sessions. "But those walls also isolated you from love. Sophia represents the chance to tear down those barriers." At the same time, he began to get involved in social work, not as a marketing ploy to improve his image, but as a genuine way to honor Elena's memory and prepare himself to be the father that Sophia deserved. He visited shelters, funded education programs for underprivileged children, created a fund specializing in medical care for families without resources. Marina, who had become an informal intermediary between him and Sophia, reported his activities to the girl during visits to the shelter. Sophia listened to everything with interest, but without surprise. "I knew he would remember," she said simply. "The most difficult thing was dealing with the media and public opinion." His acts of charity were often viewed with skepticism, interpreted as calculated attempts at image cleanup. Critics argued that no amount of money could erase the violence he had committed against a child, but he persisted. Not for others, but for Sophia. Each letter from Elena that he read reinforced his determination to become the man she had loved, the man that Sophia expected to find. In one of the most touching letters, Elena had written, "If one day you feel too lost to continue, remember that Sophia carries half of your heart and half of mine. She is our hope in human form. All the love that we failed to express to each other lives in her. When you look at our daughter, you will see not only what we have lost, but what we can still build." During the months of separation, Sophia also grew. Despite still living in the temporary shelter, she demonstrated impressive maturity. She helped other younger children, participated in educational activities with enthusiasm, and maintained a rigorous study routine. "I want to be prepared when Dad comes back," she told Marina. "Mom always said that education was the only thing that no one could take away from me." Dr. Helena, initially skeptical about the millionaire's changes, began to follow his activities. With curiosity, she secretly visited some of the projects he had founded, spoke with beneficiaries, observed his behavior away from the cameras. "There's something different about him," she admitted to Marina during one of their conversations. "I don't know if it's genuine or if he's a very good actor, but the changes are considerable." Marina smiled. Sophia always said that he just needed to remember who he was. Maybe she was right from the beginning. Meanwhile, the millionaire also faced professional challenges. Some investors, uncomfortable with his new public image, withdrew partnerships. Contracts were cancelled. His fortune, although still substantial, had decreased significantly. Interestingly, this didn't disturb him as much as he expected. For the first time, he realized that there were things more valuable than money. The possibility of meeting Sophia, of being her real father, was worth more than any business he could lose. In the 5th month of separation, he received an unexpected call from Marina. "Sophia wants to send you a letter," she said. "She wrote it herself. Can I deliver it?" When the letter arrived, he opened it with trembling hands. The childish handwriting, still uncertain, contrasted with the depth of the words. "Dad, Marina tells me that you are helping many children. I'm happy because I know Mom would be proud. She always said that you had a big heart. You were just afraid to use it. I'm studying hard and learning new things to talk to you about when we meet again. I'm not sad because I know you're preparing to be my father, just like I'm preparing to be your daughter. 1 month isn't a long time when we've waited all our lives. I love you, Sophia." Upon reading those words, the millionaire finally understood what Elena had tried to teach him years ago. True love is not possession or control, but mutual growth and patient waiting. Sophia wasn't just awaiting his return. She was growing to meet him as a better person, just as he was transforming to deserve her. There was only 1 month left for the re-evaluation of the case. 1 month to prove that the transformation was real and permanent. 1 month to prepare for the most important meeting of his life. The day of the judicial re-evaluation arrived surrounded by a completely different atmosphere from the first hearing. The media coverage, although still intense, had changed its tone. The millionaire's 6 months of consistent social work, his documented behavioral changes, and the positive reports from psychologists and social workers had created a narrative of redemption that captured the public imagination. Sophia, now 10 years old, had grown visibly during the period of separation, not only physically but in maturity and confidence. The shelter had become a more stable environment for her, but everyone knew it was a temporary situation. The question that hung in the air was whether father and daughter could finally build a real relationship. Dr. Helena had spent the last months thoroughly investigating the millionaire's changes. She visited his social projects, interviewed beneficiaries, talked to therapists and social workers. What she discovered surprised her. "Reluctantly, I must admit that there has been a genuine transformation," she told the judge at the beginning of the hearing. "Although I maintain reservations about the speed of this change, the facts suggest a real commitment to personal growth and parental responsibility." The millionaire this time asked to speak for himself. His lawyers had prepared a technical and cautious speech, but he ignored it completely. He stood up and looked directly at Sophia, who was watching him with that characteristic serenity. "Your Honor," he began, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "6 months ago, I was a lost man. I built a life based on fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of not being in control, fear of loving and being abandoned again. That fear turned me into someone cruel, someone capable of hurting an innocent child." He paused, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "But Sophia and her mother taught me something I had forgotten. True love is not about control or possession. It's about growth, sacrifice, and faith. Elena had faith in me even when I didn't deserve it. Sophia kept that faith alive even after I hurt her. Now it's my turn to honor that faith." He turned to Sophia. "My daughter, if you accept me back, I promise to be the father that your mother always knew I could be. Not perfect, but present. Not rich in things, but rich in love for you." The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped writing, captured by the raw sincerity of the moment. Sophia stood up slowly and walked to him. Before everyone, judge, lawyers, media, strangers, she simply extended her hand. "Welcome back, Dad," she said. When their hands touched, it was as if years of separation, pain, and misunderstanding simply dissolved. The millionaire knelt down to be at Sophia's height, and for the first time in their lives, father and daughter embraced. The judge, visibly moved but still cautious, established a period of gradual adaptation. Supervised visits for 6 months, then re-evaluation for possible shared custody. It was a fair compromise that prioritized Sophia's well-being above all else. But the most significant moment came after the hearing, when father and daughter had their first conversation alone in 6 months. Sitting in a reserved room of the courthouse, with Marina discreetly present for supervision, they could finally get to know each other. "Did you read all of Mom's letters?" Sophia asked. "All of them," he replied. "Your mother was a wise woman. She knew me better than I knew myself. She always said that you were like a diamond covered in mud. The diamond was there, it just needed to be cleaned." The analogy made him smile, the first genuine smile in months. "And you? How was it for you all these months?" Sophia thought carefully before answering. "Sad sometimes, but not hopeless. Mum taught me that good things are worth waiting for, and I knew you would come back different." "How did you know?" because Mom told me that when you saw me for the first time, your heart would remember how to love. I saw that happen the day you pushed me. I saw the exact moment when you remembered. The depth of her understanding left him speechless. At 10 years old, Sophia had understood emotional dynamics that he had taken decades to recognize. They spent the afternoon talking about everything. About Elena, about the months of separation, about dreams for the future. Sophia spoke about her passion for studies, especially literature. He spoke about the social projects he had created, about how each child helped made him think of her. "Do you want to continue living in the shelter while we get to know each other better?" he asked. "For now, yes, it's safe there, and Marina is my friend. But I would like to spend weekends with you if I can." "Of course you can. We can do whatever you want." Sophia smiled. "I want to see the places where you and Mom met. I want to understand your story, and I want to help with your projects for other children." "Why?" "Because Mom always said that when we get a second chance, we should use it to help others have the same opportunity." At that moment, the millionaire fully understood the extent of his transformation. 6 months ago, he thought only of himself. Now looking at Sophia, all he wanted was to be worthy of her, to create a better world for her and for all children like her. When they said goodbye at the end of the day, Sophia gave him one more letter from Elena. "This is the last one," she said. Mom wrote it in the hospital a few days before she died. That night, alone at home, he opened the final letter. "Eduardo, if you are reading this, it means that you have found our daughter and that she has found you. It means that love has conquered fear, that faith has conquered doubt. Sophia is extraordinary, but you have already discovered that. She has the ability to see the best in people and to bring out that goodness. It's the most precious gift I can leave to this world. Take care of her, but more importantly, let her take care of you too. The love between father and daughter is a two-way street. You both have a lot to teach each other. I am happy knowing that you have finally found each other. Elena." For the first time in months of tears, he cried tears of pure joy. The journey back home, to Sophia, to himself, to the man Elena had loved, was finally complete. A year after the judicial re-evaluation, the life of father and daughter had found a harmonious rhythm that surpassed even Elena's most optimistic dreams. Sophia now divided her time between the apartment that the millionaire had carefully prepared for her and the shelter, where she continued to help other children as a volunteer. The apartment wasn't ostentatious. He had learned that Sophia valued affection and attention more than material luxuries. It was a cozy space, filled with books, photos of the family that never had the chance to be, and a special corner where Elena's letters were carefully preserved in a handmade wooden box. Their routine had established itself naturally. Mornings, together having breakfast and planning the day. Afternoons dedicated to Sophia's studies and to his work, now focused mostly on social projects. Nights talking about everything and nothing, making up for lost time with stories, dreams, and plans for the future. The millionaire's transformation was visible to everyone who knew him. Where before there was coldness, now there was compassion. Where there was arrogance, grew genuine humility. His employees noticed the change. He remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, created welfare programs that went far beyond legal obligations. But the deepest change was invisible. He had learned to love without fear. Sophia had taught him that true love does not diminish when it is shared, but grows. Every affection he gave her, every moment of patience, every sacrifice for her well-being made him more capable of loving, not less. Sophia, in turn, flourished under the care of a present and attentive father. Her grades in school were exceptional, but more importantly, she had developed a natural leadership among the children. In the shelter, she was the one who consoled the newcomers, who organized activities, who kept hope alive in the hearts of those who had lost everything. She has Elena's gift for seeing the best in people, Marina commented in one of the conversations, with the millionaire. But she has your determination and strength. It's a powerful combination. The social project most dear to both was the family reunification program they had created together. Inspired by their own journey, they dedicated themselves to helping parents and children separated by circumstances to find each other again. Sophia participated actively, telling her story to other parents who had lost their way, showing that genuine transformation was possible. My mom always said that when someone gets a second chance, they should use it to create third chances for others, Sophia explained during one of the talks they gave together. Dad and I got our second chance. Now we want to help other families get theirs. Dr. Helena, who had become an unexpected ally, often accompanied them in these activities. Her legal expertise combined with the personal story of transformation of father and daughter created a unique and effective approach to complex reunification cases. You two taught me that sometimes the system needs to have faith in people as much as protect them, she admitted at one of the meetings. It's a delicate balance, but when it works, the results are extraordinary. On a special autumn afternoon, exactly 2 years after the first traumatic encounter on the sidewalk, father and daughter visited the cemetery where Eleanor was buried. It was the first time that the millionaire had visited the grave of the woman he had loved and lost. Sophia had carefully prepared the moment. She brought wildflowers, Elena's favorites, and a letter that she herself had written to her mother. "Mom," Sophia read aloud before the simple tombstone. "Dad finally remembered who he is. You were right about everything. He's a good man who was just lost. Now we're helping other people find themselves too. Thank you for keeping hope when I couldn't. Thank you for teaching me to love without fear. Thank you for never letting me forget that my dad would come back." The millionaire knelt beside the grave, placing his own letter on the earth. "Elena," he whispered, "thank you for giving me the most extraordinary daughter in the world. Thank you for having faith in me when I didn't deserve it. I promise to take care of her, protect her, and love her as you would. Our second chance has become the most precious thing in my life." As they got up to leave, Sophia took her father's hand. "You know what Mom told me once? That happy endings aren't about never having problems again. They're about having people we love to face the problems with us." He squeezed his daughter's small, warm hand. "Your mother was very wise. And you learned to be wise too." As they walked back to the car, Sophia stopped and looked back one last time. "Mom, we did it," she said to the wind. "Dad came home." At that moment, the millionaire fully understood the meaning of the phrase that had changed his life forever. "My dad will be back" hadn't been just the declaration of faith of an abandoned child. It had been a prophecy about redemption, about the transformative power of unconditional love, about second chances that can be born from the darkest moments. Sophia had waited for him to come back not only physically, but emotionally, to return to being the man that Elena had loved, the man he always had the potential to be, and he had returned not only for her, but for himself. 2 years after that first brutal encounter on the sidewalk, they had built something that not even Elena, in her most optimistic dreams, had imagined. A true family, based on love, respect, and mutual growth. A family that honored the past, but looked with hope to the future. The millionaire's empire of concrete and glass still existed, but now it served a greater purpose. Each building constructed included community spaces. Each profit earned was partially directed to social programs. Each business decision was filtered through a simple question that Sophia had taught him. Will this help anyone besides ourselves? And Sophia, she continued to be the extraordinary girl who had touched the heart of a lost man with her unwavering faith. But now she was also a beloved daughter, a brilliant student, a little leader who inspired others with her story of hope. Overcoming abandonment. On quiet nights, when they did the joint reading that had become a tradition between them, the millionaire sometimes looked at Sophia and saw Elena in his daughter's gestures, heard the wisdom of the mother in the child's words, and in his heart he felt a deep gratitude not only for what he had found, but for the man he had become on the journey. Elena's last letter had ended with a phrase that was now framed in his office. "Love always finds a way back home." Sophia had been that way. She had been the bridge between the man he was and the man he could be. She had been the living proof that it is never too late to choose love over fear, connection over loneliness, redemption over regret. "My dad will be back," she had said, with absolute certainty on that first traumatic day. And she was right. He had come home, to her, to himself, to the life he had let slip away, but that had never been too late to recover. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for new stories every day. Share in the comments. What would you do in the millionaire's place? This story of redemption and unconditional love deserves to be shared with someone special.